All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I am your host, Seth Pringle. I'm Program Manager at the Sam Elfrida Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. Our guest presenter today is John Conver Lutz. Very excited to have him with us. Thank you all for making a donation to join the talk. That is, this has been a huge help. We've been very grateful to our community support through all this shutdown for the past year now. These online talks have been a good way for us to earn some fundraising revenue. So thank you so much for your generous donations. We are looking at reopening very soon. So keep an eye out for, we'll be announcing very soon the details of, we're making plans for reopening our home tours of the historic home of Sam Elfrida Maloof, as well as our gardens. I really want to get everybody out to the gardens while they're really beautiful right now with flowers blooming, and it's just such a beautiful time of year. So hope to see you soon out here at the Maloof. And yeah, we'll be announcing our reopening across all channels, email and social media. So just keep an eye out for that. So I'm going to start with, before I introduce John, I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of native lands. The Sam Elfrida Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of Tovangar, or the Tongva world. This area includes the Los Angeles Basin, South Channel Islands, San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, and portions of Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside counties. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work for the Taraxacome, or indigenous peoples, in this place. As an institution located on unceded indigenous land, we pay our respects to Hanukvatum ancestors, Ahihirum elders, and Ivuhinkem, our relatives, relations, past, present, and emerging. So I'm going to introduce John in just a second here, but just some technical details to go over. We are recording the talk so that if you miss a portion, if your Wi-Fi fails you for a few minutes, or if you have to leave early, or I'll send you a link after the talk to a YouTube recording so that you can catch anything that you missed. After John gives his presentation, we're going to do a Q&A. So put your questions, you can put your questions in the chat box at any time throughout the talk. We'll just get to them after the presentation, but you can type it in there, as the questions come to mind, type those into the chat box, and we'll have a conversation after the presentation. Okay, so our guest speaker today, John Conver Lutz, is a woodworker, furniture designer, manager, and educator. His work is highly influenced by the relationship between craftsperson and material through the process of producing the final product. Lutz's career began with working in the industry for high-end furniture, while also teaching at the Rochester Institute of Technology and Penland School of Crafts. He received his BFA in woodworking and furniture design in 1984 from Rochester Institute of Technology. He soon after began working for Thomas Moser Cabinet Makers in Maine, where he spent over 18 years working with the company. John has been awarded design patents and innovation design awards. He has led several AIA lectures, taught certified courses to interior designers. And since 2008, John has been general manager of George Nakashima Woodworkers and continues to create his own works while focusing on the process of making traditional forms. In addition to his work, John supports the wood community as board member for the Center for Art and Wood in Philadelphia and as volunteer with Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Maine. So thank you for being with us, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for, I know it's tough to hang out and do these Zooms at times, so I appreciate everybody taking some time to listen to me. When I first started thinking, was asked to do this, I thought, what am I going to talk about? And after a little bit of time, I started kind of getting an idea of what I would communicate or what the story I would tell. I thought I'd talk about what inspires me and what I would have been driven to commit to this craft and the woodworking for so long. So much of that is the community of the craft. Also the teaching and training of the craft that inspires me greatly, and also the legacies of the craft that I've been a part of directly as well as indirectly. And then for my talk, I'm really going to talk about kind of present my work in kind of a story form. I've been doing kind of for a while, so I think by seeing it as a story, you'll kind of get an idea of the twists and turns, but also talk about the approach that I take to develop my current work, and also in my current works, expressing the marks of the craftsman and showing the process to which I do. So that's kind of it. So I'll give an idea of what I'm going to be talking about, and we'll start. I'll do the screen share here. So much of this idea of what has been pulled me in was really defined for me at the Maloof Foundation Futures Conference in 2019. It was there that I saw, I've always had these things in my head, but this is there that I really saw, yeah, this is why I'm so pulled to this craft. Just being at Sam Maloof's home, seeing the environment, seeing the furniture. I've been there before, but when I saw it this one time, it was like, it just pulled it all together for me. When you see the details of the gates, you see the details of his furniture, you see all the environment around you. For me, I really started to understand what it was all about as far as being a craftsman, creating a home, creating furniture, and really having a style. This was really pulled together for me when being with all my friends. You had old friends, new friends at this conference, and even people that I've known from just Wendy Mariama. I've known her for years but never really had a chance to really have time to be with her. And it was just an amazing event to be within this community and be within this space. And we would sit by fires at the hotel, and we would talk for way hours of the night and just talk about the craft. It was amazing. And then you take all this environment and you add in there the how they're continuing the legacy of Sam Maloof, Larry White teaching the craft. Amazing. I mean, the fact that it's all here, it's all there. And then you have Mike Johnson, who's continuing the legacy and building Sam Maloof's work and continuing his environment. And so you put all that together on that weekend, and it really defined it for me as far as, now I know why I do this. And so going back, I'll just kind of shoot back into the past. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and I was a little kid, and I always just goofed around with woodworking. I would carve things in the basement, and I didn't know why I was pulled to the material. Clearly I was, but for me, when I look back, I was like, geez, I spent a lot of time in my parents' basement. While my friends were playing, I'm just goofing around with wood. And my parents saw this, and they thought, well, maybe this kid's a little crafty. So they brought me to glass people and metals and showed me other woodworkers. And I was never inspired, never pulled. And then they brought me to Wharton Esherick's home right around 72, 73. This is shortly after it became a museum, after Wharton Esherick's passing. And it's just in Melbourne, PA, which wasn't far from where I lived. And when I came on the property, I was like, this is what I want to do. I was completely in. It was a turn. I was a little kid, but I just remember that moment of being so inspired and knowing that this is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a woodworker. Going into the home and seeing the furniture, seeing the spiral staircase, seeing the items. I see this today, and it's like, yeah, I still get inspired when I'm in this environment. And then I remember walking in the kitchen. I still remember the floor, and I remember the bowls and the little things he had, and the little lights he had, and the little poles to turn on the lights. It was just an amazing event for me. So, and this defined it. And I was going to be a woodworker. I want to be this dude. So I set out. I would go. I took all the high school classes I could possibly take in wood shop. I worked in my basement a lot. My parents was able to go to Philadelphia College of Art in the summers to do like summer classes in wood and design. But I was very driven at this time. This is what I wanted to be. I wanted to be this guy, and I didn't know anybody else at the time. It's just this guy. I was very fortunate to be able to go to college, and at that time I didn't know where I was going to go. But I found wood colleges that actually taught this stuff, and I found RIT, School of American Craftsmen. I looked at Boston University at the time, but I was completely attracted to RIT, Rochester Technology. I loved the environment of the community. It was on the outskirts, kind of on the edge of the university or the college. In that end of the building was glass blowers on one side. You had the potters right there across the way from a hall from the wood shop, and then right upstairs from the wood shop with the metalsmiths and weavers. And it was this whole kind of environment. I loved how Doug Sigler and Bill Kaiser bantered back and forth when I first met them. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to go here. I also it was very technical based. So I have a technical slant. So that fit me very well in that space. So when I first started doing pieces, I didn't know, all I wanted to do is I wanted to learn. And in my approach was very much, I'm going to learn from the people I knew about, the woodworkers I knew of. And of course, Sam Maloof, James Krenoff, and Nakashima. Those were George Nakashima. Those are the ones I narrowed in on, and I wanted to build pieces that as many details as possible, but in their kind of, as uses them as inspiration. And this is a cradle I built. My brother and sister-in-law were having a baby at the time, so I said, I'll make a cradle. And I was inspired. I met Sam Maloof shortly before I started this project, so I thought, wow, this is gonna be great. I saw his slides, talked to him, and I started to get a little bit of understanding of shaping and that kind of approach. But in building this, it was my techniques. I wanted to make sure I put as much techniques in. So it's steam bent ribs, laminated keel from end to end, and then the structure and the shaping structure, kind of my style, but form. It was in the building of it was effectively a ship when I was designing it. So I thought, well, I'll create these shields, if you will, presenting almost a Viking ship kind of a protection, but also giving the ability to be able to pierce through so you can see all around it. It's American black walnut oil finish. The panels are able to expand and contract inside that main keel wheel. And then the cabinet was Krenov, case on frame. It made sense to me. If I'm going to make a frame panel cabinet, if I'm going to learn all the details of frame and panel, I'm going to, why not James Krenov? It fit me. Put a lot of mortise and tenons and work this cabinet to be able to do as much as I possibly could. A lot of shaping, a lot of spoke shaping approach. It's a red oak with walnut. A little detail there, making the hinges. It was just an exploration of learning the product, learning the piece, but also inspiration from James Krenov. This is a coffee table at the when I was a kid growing up in just north of Philadelphia, my family would always do the family reunions in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And because that's where the old homestead was. And every summer we would do that. And every summer, my cousin, Jimmy Radcliffe, who was one of George Nakashima's main guys, he knew I wanted to be a woodworker, and he would just tell me all about George. Every summer, we would sit down, he'd say, "Hey, Johnny," and we would talk about George. He gave me his book. I didn't know, I certainly knew George Nakashima. And of course, as you know, when you're living somewhere and it's right up the road, you never really go, but I never really went. But he did inspire me on this piece. Although I didn't understand George's full philosophy, in this piece was architectural base, opening up to the leaves of the top, versus with George, obviously. Now that I know how George approached, this is like completely wrong, but in my approach, this was my interpretation. And coopered center panels there that are all joined into the main keel, main beam there, and then half-blind dovetails into the top. Kind of give you another detail. And as I look at this piece, and I know now that I know George's work intimately, and I know his style, this is like completely off from what. But in my mind, I was being inspired. And then I built a cabinet. I was inspired by, hey, I enjoyed the construction. I thought, well, I'll just build one of these, but it was certainly a George Nakashima inspired. But a little bit of my slant, a different layout of dovetail corners. Again, more of a distinct approach towards the base versus the base being very subordinate and hiding almost. My approach was, again, not George. Kind of, now that I know George, it was a little bit different, but that's okay. I wanted the base to be much more substantial in the visual, almost of a Art Deco. In addition to learning the processes and approaching my early pieces of learning from the crafts, it was also very inspired by focusing on history, focusing on traditional construction in a sense. This is Art Deco, obviously, but for me, it was my interpretation. And again, my drive was to build as many opportunities to learn within this one piece, within this vernacular of Art Deco design. Macassar ebony veneered columns, Macassar ebony veneered top, bent laminated front solid wood doors, solid wood Macassar ebony panels. And this gives you an idea of the detail. Again, my approach at this time was to learn and to directly be reflective of a style. And then dovetail, half-blind dovetails into the laminated drawer fronts. Towards the end of this period, I was kind of almost getting my vision. I kind of I knew what I was. I've done a lot of research for many years to be able to build pieces, and I finally kind of thought, well, I'm developing my own voice a little bit. I enjoy repetition. I enjoyed this is all offset turned hall table, if you will, kind of a sculptural piece, but a traditional form. Kind of pushing off functionality, not too many. I mean, there's no reason to have 6 legs. Why not? More legs to turn, I guess. I don't know. But I did a whole series of these in this kind of approach. But in doing this, I would do these shows. I started getting into shows and getting out there. And I was a kid, and I was so people would ask, and other people would be talking about their work and having these wonderful stories, and they would ask me, and I said, I don't know. I just build stuff. I was very. I spent so much time focusing on my work. I forgot to grow up in many regards. I'm still not grown up, but that's beside the point. But from a standpoint of confidence out there in the world, I had none. but I knew I was pretty good jig maker. I was pretty good at engineering. And at the time I was in Rochester. I was teaching at RIT with John Dodd, assisting teaching, and I enjoyed Rochester, New York. And so I got a job with Hardwood House. Hardwood House is a company in Rochester, New York. They did contract furniture. That worked for me. I didn't have to be out front. I could be in the back making these prototypes and getting them into production. And I'll let the designers do all the talking, and I would build these things. And it was great. I loved doing the work. I did a lot of product development from all these case pieces, as well as about 3 upholstered chair lines, and getting them from in prototype form, constantly building several prototypes, and finally getting approval to getting them into the manufacturing end. And I definitely had a skill set of jigs and fixtures and getting something into manufacturing. It wasn't until after about 3 years here, I felt empty because these pieces were fun, but then how many bullnoses can you do? It kind of lacked a soul. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted, but I knew that kind of wasn't it. So I left them. I bought a brand new pickup truck. I thought, well, I'm going to just take a year off and go look. I spent a year driving, looking at a lot of woodworking companies to try to find purpose in this craft of ours. I worked really hard to try to find one that I was like, okay, I wanted to work for a company. I knew that. But I did not know, but I wanted to build a product with meaning. So after a number of starts and stops and a lot of miles, I was looking. I remember the night I was looking at a New Yorker magazine, and I saw an ad. It was about this big. It was a little tiny little ad, and had a little chair on it, and it said for catalog, called Thomas Moser Cabinet Makers, Portland, Maine. And then I got the catalogs, and that was it. I saw a company that looked like it built product based on the traditional form with a shaker, but had several different. So it had a history to it. It had great product that I thought was really fun and unique, but still had that root in tradition. I loved Maine. I was very lucky to have travel a lot in Maine. My mother was a painter, so I would always spend summers on painting vacations on the coast of Maine. So it's very dear to me. So I wrote him a letter, and about 6 months later, I'm living on an island off the coast of Maine and commuting by ferry, going to work every day. And it was everything I wanted. It was just great company, great history, and great product. And then there was something I didn't expect, and that was Thomas Moser. For me, he was boss, mentor, and friend. He taught me a lot. He was extremely, he was tough. I mean, you had to work hard but I was amazed by his skill. There was many times, I remember I would be making a prototype or working on something. He would be making something right next to me, and he would have it done. He would look at me and say, "Hey, Johnny, you need any help with that?" I mean, he had no problem in making me realize that he was the craftsman. But he also created a community. He inspired a community of woodworkers at the shop. And that's just a snapshot of a few of my friends. These are still my friends. They're still dear to me. They were your buddies at work. They were your buddies at the weekends. You saw them at church. You saw them at the corner store. Auburn, Maine is small. I mean, you're all around. The line between work and community and friends was completely blurred, and the line between the owners, Mary and Tom, and their sons and friends was all one group. We all it was a community. It was just extreme. It was a really special time for me to be here. And we developed a lot of furniture. We built a lot of projects. I was their designer and project manager. And I would never, I know what it's, coming back my years at Harwood House, I know what it's like to develop a product. No, there's no such thing as the designer in my view, because it takes a lot of work to, it's one thing to sketch it, you have to have it built, somebody has to work it, somebody has to develop it, somebody has to get it into production. But we did a lot of fun projects in those days. It was a wonderful time. In Maine, you have winter, and then you have, if you know, I'm not a hunter, you basically do maple syrup in the spring and you build stone walls in the summer, and in the winter you load the wood stove. This is a house I built, 1800s colonial. Prior to building this house, I built renovated a cape. Tom was always building. Tom was building his house. Tom's sons were always building their houses, and there were many times Tom would pull in. He goes, "Well, you know, I would do it this way, and I wouldn't do it that way." And he would always. I mean, I would look up and I would see his truck pulling in. I'm like, oh no, Tom's coming over, because I know he's going to criticize. But he was always just criticizing because he wanted to support the process and to help me learn the details. Similar to my furniture and how I approach early furniture work, this was a bigger piece of furniture. I wanted to know what an 1800s colonial was. I wanted to understand the construction. I wanted to understand proportions. I wanted to understand why you do this and why you do how the siding is applied and how it progressively gets less exposure to the weather as it gets closer to the foundation. It was a labor of love. My wife and I, we moved in with just the roof on and the windows in, and with a little schoolhouse wood stove on, and we survived the winter, making the best meals ever on this little schoolhouse wood stove. It was just an amazing time of enjoying this time. I had all my wide pine floors that I just milled. Those were all stacked up in the living room, so you couldn't do anything because the whole living room downstairs was basically full of wood drying, and just lived in one of the upstairs rooms. After about, I was there for 18 years, and my daughter was now 4, and I wanted her to get to know her grandparents and her aunts and uncles. So it was a very difficult transition, but I decided to move to Bucks County, back home. It was really hard. I love Maine. It was really dear to my heart, but it was time, and I did it, and it was a tough time throughout the first year. But then I met Mira Nakashima, and she was like Tom. When I first met her, I was like, oh my gosh, she's always there. She's always focused. She still is. She's focused on the details, focused on the design, focused on everything that's going on in the shop. Very hands-on, just like Tom. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did I find this? And here it was just up the road from my family reunions, and But Amir and I hit it off. She saw that I appreciated craft. She she knew that I worked with Tom for many years. And after about 6 months of meeting her, she hired me as her general manager. And it's been an incredible opportunity. I've been there since 2008, and still always amazed at her attention to detail and skill. And then you have the guys. This is it's been an amazing time. When I first started, it was an older crowd. I took what I've learned over the years and created a very specific apprentice program to train the younger group. Jerry Everett, the guy in the red by the pole barn, He was the lead trainer. Now we have Alyssa Francis. She's the lead trainer. Jerry retired. But we kept to George's legacy. We kept to George's focus. And it was kind of nice to be able to have something very specific to train. And that was the approach. And that was the approach I took on kind of as we hired and as I developed these relationships with these guys to be able to focus on this is a specific training plan. So we almost created this school environment at George Nakashima's. In addition, and there, oh, sorry, there's the crowd of everybody. That's who we are today. In addition, one of the challenges of living working with Nakashima is it's 9 acres, 12 buildings, and it takes a village to run it. I mean, a lot of wood, a tremendous amount of work to be able to do throughout the process. So we created a relation, and in order to take care of all those buildings, I extended that training plan, apprentice plan into the property as well. We're very focused on the preservation of the property, building with George's intent, very simple tools, very simple process. We don't have a shaper. We don't have a lot of basic machines that you might find in some woodworking companies. We have bandsaw, planer, table saw, and lathe, and it's a very simple process. But we approach this with our work as well outside. And these are some of the things we do out there. We build as George intended. We focus on the process. We focus on the details. And it was at this time when in working here, I started to get inspired with my own work. I enjoyed the learning of how much you can really do with simple tools, how much and how to approach pieces in an approach work. Knowing that that's all you have, how do you approach the development of a multi-line piece of collection of furniture, and also multi-complex details throughout the property. And everywhere you look on the property, whether it's inside, I always compare it to Sam Malouf's home or Wharton Eschrick's home. It's all this constant visual and constant energy of details, and you see it throughout, and you see these textures, and you realize you don't need finish, and how can you approach pieces, and how can you apply yourself, and how can you build furniture in this manner? So this was starting to build within me, and then you see the details everywhere you look. And then you see the finishes everywhere you look. And it's just, as from a woodworker who had a background that I've had, and who's now looking at it in the perspective of through different eyes, it became evident to me that I know a story. I see something now. I can understand what I'm looking for. I come from industry, and this opened up a whole different vision of what a piece could mean and what a piece could do. So, and then you saw this in the slabs every day. You just see this constant in the visual line. And at this time, I was thinking, okay, I'm 50 now. I'm running out of time. It's either now or never. And I was very lucky to be able to have friends of mine. Started to develop wood relationships in the wood community. I met Mark Sferry at the Bucks County Community College, and it just was this pull. I started to get to meet people, and here I found Maine. I found Maine on this 9-acre property in New Hope, and I found Maine within this Maine community with the Bucks County woodworkers, with the I got connected with the Center for Art and Wood in Philadelphia, and it was I just had this pull. I had to do this. This is what it's time for me at this point. And so my first piece was there's a reason why I started with a piece that I left off 30 some odd years ago. But now my approach was specific, simple tools, very limited aspect of shaping. My shaping was, okay, if it's got to be done on a lathe, it's going to be done on a lathe. How complex can you make it on a lathe? If I only have a table saw, what can I possibly do on a table saw? So that was I restricted myself towards a machine language. I restricted myself towards wanting to create these pieces in a vision. And I wanted them to tell a story. It's almost as though I put this thing aside for 30 some odd years where I left off, and then I had to do this kind of travel, and now I knew what I was doing. I was pretty focused on my approach at this time. And this is how I approach things. I have a tendency to be technical. I have a tendency to have a desire to learn as much as I possibly can on a particular piece. And it's the same piece in the cherry, but with the same idea of these fans, table saw, joiner, lathe, and handwork. And that's kind of a detail of this thing going around. This is an offset turn. That's how I do these legs. And it's on a jig, so I'm able to flip it back and forth. So I'm able to make them in multiples, and it's in that way, if you will, on the lathe. So I'm able to change the angle and change the proportion of the arc on the turn. And that's these pieces when prior assembly. And in my woodwork, my engineering head is I love this image. I mean, I love the parts when they're all made, and they were just made very in a hard way, but they look simple. But you have to put it together, so I put it together. But when I see this image, it's definitely, for me, it's the vision, and for me, it's the language in which I'm communicating. This piece is called the turning point table, and there's a reason for that. I took it to the next step. I love seeing the natural finishes, and I love seeing these. Just let it go. Don't even sand it. The aprons on this piece are the only piece that's sanded. The rest of it's hand shaped on the lower structures. The legs are all hand turned, or obviously hand turned, but I left the turning lines the same. But you have to be a little mechanical. You have to be, for me, I had to be pretty specific. The cove cutting that you kind of see on that detail of the wave there, you had to be pretty consistent in your cove cutting, and so they all look the same. And then Spheri taught me the milk paint, and it gave me the catalyst to be able to present these pieces. This is a detail of a nesting tables that I've made. Again, I'm using the approach of all on the lathe, all the components. The machining of the top is all lathe. You can see the bandsaw lines on the edge. I don't think any of this was sanded except for the little nubs. But that's a little set of nesting tables. And true to form, I do have a tendency to make things in multiples. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make a lot of them because I want to learn how to do them, and I want to see if I can make them in a pattern where they're as consistent as possible. Getting to this concept of sculptural forms and functional, I thought of these screens. I've done a couple of these, and in these screens, it's like, let's do a stand. So it could be the function is really just a standing and dividing space, but the sculptural aspect, it could be whatever it wants. So these are, I call this the journey, because at this point, this has been a journey for me. This has not been easy for me to kind of get to this actual stage, let alone talk about it. But I mean, to let my voice let it go and to express it in the way I want to express it, which is showing the marks and showing the handwork and letting it be a freer piece in my mind, but also rigid in the sense that it's the technical approach of making. But these are just hand planed walnut panels, shields, if you will, taking advantage of the positive and negative space, and that turned in carved spears. This is just a fun piece. That was, but again, kind of leaning towards this concept of sculptural, functional / forms. When I turn, I've always enjoyed the process of the pre-sanding to see the shaping of the turns. And when I've done these, I've always enjoyed seeing, this almost reminded me of fabric. So I was thinking about what an interesting piece might be. And that's when this kind of popped in my head to be able to kind of create these. This is called 3-piece suit. The panels are turned, the little buttons, and there's those connectors, and then the legs are turned, and then they have little feet at the bottom that are carved and burned laces. But this is it being turned. I'm not so big, but I happen to turn big. This is it going around. It's a 48. This is max width, like length, diameter I could do on the lathe. And then this is it stops. So if for any lathe turners, people know turning, when it's going around, you're basically only turning wood for a very short period of time. The rest of it, you're turning air. And so your cutting is to be pretty, when it's going around, you really have to be focused to be able to maintain consistency around on the panel. But I created this jig, so I'm able to flip these panels back and forth to be able to get the right shaping. I can unbolt them, I can bolt them back again, I can unbolt them back and bolt again. And then when I pull them off, I'm able to flip them. So I'm able to achieve this kind of 3-piece, this kind of suit kind of environment style. And then carving of the lapels. In continuation of this approach of pieces, this is an approach of complex process, if you will. This is a little stool. It was inspired by Esherick. It's all carved, but all the legs, the 3 legs, and the stretchers have their own different turn. And if anybody knows, any woodworkers know anything about compound steam bending, it's not easy to be able to have it in uniform, and every bend is different. All the legs have a different bend, because I wanted it to look like this organic form. And everything's carved, so everything has to be a clean cut, a clean carve. And the little pod foot is carved. I think the only thing sanded is the underside of this. And I do like steam bending, and I do like making a lot of steam bends, and I do like making it complex. Simple side chair, but every bend is different on the back legs, on the fronts, on the rails, and the stiles, and bending these and the stretch on the ash spindles and ash little rails coming from front to back, little rosewood wedges. And if anybody knows steam bending, this is kind of it wrapped around in a form. I have a basement full of forms. I don't know what I'm going to do with them all, but because I don't want to get rid of them. And I just keep on making another bend and another form. And I do it right in my front driveway, which is kind of odd. This little lamp, I wanted to explore the shell concept of very thin laminates. It has a fiberglass interior to be able to give it some rigidity. It's a curly maple veneer, but you're able to see these shells. The stand is one thing, but I was really focused on the shells. Shells is what I was passionate about, and I was interested in seeing this the relationship between these shells, the relationship and how these shells change over time. Humidity changes it a little bit. If it's a really damp day, it may have a little different shape to it, or if it's a really dry day, it may have a little shape to it, because it's just a very thin 3-ply mount. But I wanted to have this kind of asymmetrical, not a little bit functional. It just hides the bulb sort of, but it's mostly this kind of relationship between these two shells that I was inspired by. And then one of them I applied a coloration in the glue, so I wanted to see what would happen, because why not focus on it when it's turned on. And again, this is that relationship between these shells. This is kind of what it looks like when it's lit, but the red really pops in this photograph. This is a dining table I did, traditional structural form, trestle base, traditional enough, but I wanted to turn it. So this whole base is fully turned. Every part is turned, every component. It's all offset split turnings. And it would have been much easier just to make it square, but I wanted to test turning. How big can I go, and how large can I go on these offset turnings to be able to achieve these? I knew what the shape I wanted to get, and I knew I wanted to have this traditional trestle form, but I wanted to do it in a whole different manner, which is, again, my little bit of my process. And that's kind of it going around. It's a little nerve-wracking at times. And that's kind of it when it's without the top. Without the top, it's actually interesting. When you put top on, you kind of lose all the details, but that's okay. That wasn't the reason for the purpose. The reason for the work was to approach it and to learn and to achieve this shape that is could only be achieved by through the lathe. And that's a little detail of it being joined in the top structure. And then its sister is a little bench, turned leg bench, but doesn't look like a turned leg. But it's still the concept of these turned leg parts, again, offset components, but this time piercing through the top, so you actually see the work that goes into it. I mean, most people don't understand it, but if you're a woodworker, you kind of get the understanding that that's things turn. And then taking advantage of the fact that it can, of the shape itself, to be able to go through the top, pierce through the top, and actually be almost like a dovetail, if you will, creating the structure and taking advantage of the shape. And I did these little poddy things, pods, little for me, a lesson in carving, a lesson in sculpting, and it's a nice little thing to learn. It's not a huge piece of furniture to learn it on. I can do it. I can do a lot of different techniques on one little pod, and then these simple little tea strainers, just something I fuss around with. But I enjoy them. So during this, during COVID, I call these my COVID bowls. I've always been, my approach to turning has always been more mechanical, as you kind of saw. I've never been a bowl turner, but I had this community that I'm in with these woodworkers, and a lot of them are bowl turners in Bucks County. They pull me. It's an amazing environment to be with. One of my buddies calls me up and says, I got a lathe. You can get a lathe. And I mean, this is what it does when you're around friends and people that support you. So I got a lathe, and my buddy said, well, I got to start bowl turning. And I said, well, I kind of like these mechanical parts. You need to bowl turn. But bowl turning has been an incredible opportunity. It's been a great time to be able to do it during COVID, because I'm home anyway. And I figured maybe I might be a decent bowl turner after about 1,000 bowls. Bowl turning is it's a process that it's technical sometimes. It's free flowing at others. But no bowls, to be able to have the precision of each bowl being the same and each wall thickness being accurate, it's going to be a lifetime of learning. And I better live to 100 because I'm hoping to be able to be a good bowl turner. That's my goal anyway. That's my first bowl, so I was like, yeah, I took a photograph. I was, hey, I finally bowl turning to my buddy. But it didn't take me long to kind of start to think differently on these bowls. I let the chainsaw edge on the top be the free. I mean, I'm not a free edge kind of guy. That's not my style. I kind of like the machine edge of the chainsaw. I like accentuating that. So as opposed to the free edge showing, my drive is to keep that chainsaw where you're actually able to see, oh yeah, this was cut from a log. And then accentuate that using burning around the edge to be able to show the story a little bit of that. No, that's intentional to have it be rough like that. I can't not make a jig, so I created these little bowls that where I have a jig that holds a grinder, and I'm able to with the lathe has sequence where you can move them clockwise or move them sequentially to be able to be consistent. But then this jig comes in and grinds this edge to be able to achieve this kind of scalloped, consistent look. But again, I wanted to leave the grind. I wanted to kind of show, it was done by a grinder and not to hide that. And then just kind of give you an idea. This is how it's. This is kind of a normal thing in woodworking, but this is accentuate the burning. And that kind of what that does is that really accentuates that burn to be able to, or that grind. So you can really see and not try to hide the grind marks, but really present them in a visual way. And the more I was getting into these bowl turnings, I was realizing this has a whole story. I mean, in this little bowl, you have a whole thing. It's just like a small piece of furniture. You go to the logs, you go into the woods, you collect the logs, you look for the right tree, you look for the tree that has the pattern. When you're chainsawing it, you're realizing, okay, I'm going to be bowl turning this. So what are the patterns I'm looking for? I never would have. I knew about it, but when I didn't really get this aha moment until I started getting more and more into bowl turning, which is the same concept of the furniture end that I'm so passionate about, as far as watching this whole process and be able to present this process in the piece itself and have the piece speak of the process. And that will give you an idea once, kind of not those angles, but that idea of leaving the chainsaw, just let it go, let it show. And that's a little bowl detail of letting that chainsaw line show. And I was kind of getting into it's been an amazing time. I've taken advantage of this COVID time pretty well, I guess. It's been tough, but and then to continue the idea is you make tools. I had a great opportunity to teach at Penland School of Crafts in North Carolina. I was assistant teacher there, and one of the times I was there, I had an opportunity to spend the next week, and I worked with David Ellsworth. I certainly never thought I'd be a bowl turner, but I was inspired by his style and having a chance to be able to understand what his approach was. And of course, I saw his tools, And I thought, I'm going to make these tools. I can't wait. And well, 32 years later, I'm finally making the tool. I'm making the tools. So I was really excited about that. But it was, I sent to my buddies and I said, hey, I'm making tools. They're like, yeah, right. Who cares? But for me, it was big because I was finally, I've waited a long time to get to that stage. And then I have my, I've never felt comfortable in my own skin to be able to sign work. I've never been confident enough, and it's almost like, and maybe it's because I'm almost 60 now, so I'm like, okay, it's either now or never. I'm finally at a point where I think, you know what, I'm going to start signing things. I think I got it. I think I feel like I might be good enough. I might have enough behind me and enough skill to be able to to know what I'm saying in these pieces so I'm finally, this was big for me. I was like, wow, I'm signing something versus just a little scribble in the corner, real small thing almost. I was actually there. And when I thought about doing my little signatures, I thought, well, of course I will be doing a nod to Maine. Maine is near and dear to my heart. It means a lot to me. This happens to be Monhegan Island. So when you approach Monhegan Island on the boat, this is what you see. Monhegan's the big island, and then the little tiny island is Manana. So this is my nod. This is my little technically my signature, if you will. It's my nod to Maine, and finally getting to that point. So anyway, so it's to be continued. I'm keeping it like that because I have a lot of work to do. But I'm going to let my passions be my guide of this community that I'm so lucky to be a part of. I'm going to let this desire to want to continue legacies that I'm a part of and continue this craft and help teach younger people this craft. And my own work. I don't know where that's going. I feel like I'm getting some thoughts together as far as I should say the words to what I'm communicating in my work. And I got to go back to the Sam Malouf's the Futures Conference, and there was a person there when we were together, and she stood up and she goes, well, one thing about us craftspeople, we cannot not do. And I'm like, that's my problem. I cannot not do this. I'm a little, I focused on this, I focus on a lot, and this is something that I'm extremely passionate about. So anyway, but thank you everybody for listening to this, listening to a little bit of my story and journey.
All right, thank you so much, John. So we have some questions in the chat. We'll get to some of these. Keep typing your questions in there if you have any, please, everyone. And we'll see how many we get to. So while we're on the topic of bowls, Bruce is asking about your lathe. How long, what sizes, and what woods do you like for your bowls?
Sure. It's a one-way, 24, 36. I would say I happen to have a lot of soft maple in my wood, so I'm enjoying that. I enjoy the colorations, the drastic colorations between the color of the wood, but also the imperfections in the wood itself.
And you're collecting your own wood? Is that from your property?
Yeah. I mean, I live in the kind of like a little suburbia town. We could talk about not being in Maine, and I got a whole tarp. It's like my neighbor's like, John, what the heck are you doing over there? But yeah, I've quite a tarp of material in my front yard. Surprised I haven't gotten a notice from the township. I don't live in Maine now, so I mean, in Maine you can do whatever you want, but here it's a little bit different. But anyway, yes, I have a collection.
Marie says, these examples are beautiful from your slides. And she says, are they first efforts or are there dozens of failed attempts behind them?
Oh, there's dozens of failed attempts. Many of throwing off the lathe, many of not getting it right. Yeah, these are the I keep my fire. I do burn wood, and I have a lot of rejects to be able to get. Once I get the piece down, though, once I get the component right, and I get the jig right, and I get the cut right, I can get on. But it's I can narrow in on it, but it's a lot of rejects. Probably Tom Moser used to say, it takes, Johnny, don't worry about it. It takes about 100, 200, 300 designs to get anything decent. And I go, good thing, because I had about 200 parts of reject stock in my burn pile.
And so you've talked some about kind of mentorship and apprenticeship. And can you just talk a little bit more about the importance of that in your own formation as a young woodworker, and then also your approach to teaching and what you're trying to continue with the craft?
Sure. I'm very lucky to have great teachers. Whether they were my high school woodshop teacher to professors to Tom Moser always teaching, and my being within that environment and having gone through it has given me a real clear understanding of the need to nurture, specifically in a company environment, because not everybody communicates the same way. Not everybody learns the same way. I mean, some people, when they learn, they might need 5 more times to be told, or then they need to be shown. When we hire, I'm all in on that hire. I'm not going to I know this is how I approach the apprenticeship. I made a decision to cultivate that person, and if they're not growing well, that's my fault. I will take that ownership. Then I need to work the training. I need to, and it's a great opportunity, because this is not just a student that just kind of comes and goes in a year. This is a student that you've been with for 8 years to cultivate. And they're your employee, but most importantly, you have a commitment to them. And they're not just going to walk away. You have to focus on them. And as I said, every employee learns differently, and you have to be able to, as an environment that we've created in our apprentice program, is to be able to really bring the right people in, because some people might really learn well with one person, but another person might not learn well with that individual. But I'm not going to fire them. I mean, I'm dedicated to taking on the responsibility to that. And that's kind of how I approach it, because I know not everybody learns the same way. It's really it's on the trainer to know when they might not be the one that should be training. So that's how I approach it, and that's because I bumped around a lot to get to where I am, and through that process, I'm giving that to the apprentice program.
So Eaton asks, when you are working with organic forms, are you fitting by trial and error, or have you laid out the parts and joinery and shaping the pieces to the design?
I pretty much, on the real organic ones, it's just a fitting. And it's just a hand fit each and every time, because it's an organic shape. Every part's different. So it has to be, to get a good shoulder, that's all just handwork. And that's how I focus on that. But occasionally I get to a point where where I've been able to repeat, even though it's an organic shape, there's consistency in the organic shape, and at that time I can get much more precise and not have to worry about the fitting as much, but just be able to get a really clean cut.
And so we should probably wrap up in a moment here. So I think a good question to end on is Marie is asking, is your work for sale anywhere?
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine, Bobby Bell. He has the Modern Gallery in Philadelphia, and he's been an incredible supporter of mine, bringing my pieces to shows and having in his gallery. And I owe a lot of respect and appreciation for him to kind of deal with me, because I do this on the side. I mean, I don't do this full time, so it's difficult. I mean, my focus is these pieces are for me, as opposed to this particular client. So it might be a little bit, I'm sure he's probably rolls his eyes a lot, like, oh geez, he's got this, what am I gonna do with that? But it's the Modern guy in Philadelphia, and he's been an incredible supporter of my work and me as a person.
Great. Well, thanks so much, John. And thanks everybody for joining us, and keep an eye out for our reopening plans announcements. And I'll leave it to you, John, if you have any last words for everyone.
No, just thank you very much. And thank you for, it's been I was telling Seth before we started on, this has been a wonderful opportunity for me to drive to this, to put a lot of my thoughts into words. So I thank everybody for just spending the time to listen to me yabber.
All right. Very good. Well, take care, everyone. Thanks again, John. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks so much.